Sam, welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Sam Chan. So we have at least three people medically trained on this call. Sam is a much loved colleague of ours at the City Bible Forum and Third Space. Sam has had a couple of different careers, both as a doctor, but also as a theologian, as a teacher, as an author and communicator. And as Kokong said, we've had Sam speak, and it's great to have him back. And Sam, your talk today, if we have a title, just remind us what that is.
I think it was going to be when transition feels like nothing is happening.
Great. I think that's what we advertised. So I'm going to pass to Sam, and Sam's going to share his thoughts, and then we will open it up for some interaction. So over to you, Sam.
All right. Thanks, Peter. And thank you to all of you for opening up your homes. I guess that's where we're coming from, and inviting me into your morning. So once again, my name is Sam. I was born in Hong Kong. My parents moved to Australia when I was just a 6-month-old baby. We spent 2 years in Darwin. Back then, that was the 1960s. That was the only way Asians could get into Australia. There was a White Australia policy. My dad was a doctor, so resident at Darwin Hospital. Then I spent 6 years in Adelaide. And then from the age of 8 onwards, I've been in Sydney. We started off in the western suburbs, Campbelltown, Lumia, Minnow. That's one station at a time on the western suburbs line. So I'm a true Westie, if you want to call me anything, from the western suburbs of Sydney. And for the first part of my life, I lived the Asian dream. I did what Asians are meant to do: just study hard, don't ask questions, stay out of trouble. And for a while, the system rewarded me. I got the marks I wanted in high school. I got into medicine at Sydney University, got through the 5 years of med school. I worked hard as a junior doctor for about 4 years. I was trying to get on the surgical training scheme. One thing led to another, and I burnt out. Like, I snapped, I quit. It was September. It wasn't even the end of the year when you're meant to finish a contract. I just resigned. And I think that was my first lesson, where the system doesn't always reward you. It's not just about working hard and staying out of trouble. Maybe you do need mentors. You need networking. So that was my first lesson. So then I went to the next phase of my life, where I switched careers, and I went into full-time Christian ministry. So that was a whole new journey for me. I had to retrain. I did a 1-year certificate at Bible College that turned into a 3-year Bachelor of Theology, which turned into a Master's of Theology in the USA, which turned into a 5-year PhD in the USA. I came back to Australia, and I taught for 10 years at a Bible college. And again, I burnt out. I snapped. It was the start of the year, January, and I just resigned, with no notice. So there's a little pattern going on here in my life. And this one was harder, because I didn't resign because I was burnt out. I resigned because of, how would I put it, like clashes with leadership, toxic leadership, for the want of a better word. And this one hurt more because I felt like I was betrayed. We're told to leave the secular workforce to go into full-time Christian ministry because it's a so-called higher calling. Don't be self-serving, serve the church instead. But then you find there are just as many self-serving Christian leaders as there are in the secular world. And you were taught, it wasn't about name, reputation, empire building, but there's just as much of that, if not more so, in the Christian world. So then I went into the next phase of my life, which I call the wilderness phase. Like, for about a year, I was in transition, and I was angry, I was bitter, and I was hurt. And they say an angry man is usually a sad man on the inside. And I think that really describes how I felt in my transition year. Features of my transition year would be, it just felt like a nothing year, like nothing was happening. And the way I describe it is, I had no reason to get out of bed. I would wake up in the morning and think, why am I waking up? What am I waking up for? It makes no difference whether I get up at 7 in the morning or 10 in the morning or 1 in the afternoon. There's actually nothing I'm waking up for. So it really felt like a nothing time of my life. Nothing's happening. It's a wilderness year. I'm just wandering the wilderness. I'm just in a car circling the block. That's all I'm doing because I'm not going anywhere. It was also a lonely time because all my friends had something to do. They were busy, they were at work, but I had no work. I was idle. I remember when I was seeing a counselor and she just summed it all up. She said, "You have too much time right now." And I thought, that's exactly it. Right now, I have too much time. And it also felt like it was purposeless. There was no meaning, there was no hope. I'm not going anywhere. And I would try to fill up my time with things I promised myself I was always want to do, like leisure. I'm going to have time off work. But time off work only works if you have work that you're having time off from. So leisure and rest didn't feel like leisure and rest. I would promise myself to do all the things I promised myself I always want to do, like take up a language, learn a musical instrument. But again, somehow they just felt like blah activities because there was no reason, there was no rhythm, there was no purpose behind what I was doing. I even tried to retrain. I signed up to TAFE to become a personal trainer, and I only got 2 out of the 6 units done. So I even failed at trying to retrain. So, well, these days, obviously, I'm in the next phase of my life. I'm working with City Bible Forum. But what can I take away from that nothing time of my life? What can I take away from that wilderness moment when nothing seemed to be happening? And here I just want to share with you 2 insights that I've had recently that helped me look back on that year to work out what was going on. The first insight is this. Just a little while ago, earlier this year, I was going through my Bible, and there's a story in the Bible from a book in the Bible called John, where Jesus supposedly feeds 5,000 people from 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish. And I remember, now you hear this story all the time when you're a kid in Sunday school and you think nothing of it. Okay, that's just one of those happy, funny stories you find in the Bible about Jesus. Jesus feeds 5,000 people with 5 loaves, 2 fish, whatever. But because I've been trained in Greek, I looked up the reading in the Greek. And in the English Bible, it says Jesus fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish. That's what the English Bible says. In the original Greek, it says he fed them with 2 fishettes. That's a little diminutive to show that these were tiny fish. They're like sardines. Jesus fed 5,000 people with 5 little buns and 2 sardines. And I was like, okay, you have lost me at this moment. The Bible asks us to believe a lot of outrageous claims. Jesus rose from the dead. Jesus born of a virgin. Jesus walks on water. And up until now, I think, okay, I can believe these things because, who knows how deep the water really was. But this moment, you have lost me. There's no way Jesus can feed 5,000 people with 2 sardines. I'm a man of the sciences. I believe in evidence-based belief. You cannot feed 5,000 people with 2 sardines. You have to break the laws of physics for that to happen. But then I took a pause. I took a time out. I thought, well, hang on. I've only got 2 choices in life. Really, there are only 2 choices. Choice number 1, this universe came from nothing. Life came from non-life. Rational thought came from irrational matter. And it happened de novo, by blind chance. It just somehow happened that a universe came from nothing, life came from non-life, and rational thought comes from irrational matter. Or this universe comes from nothing, life comes from non-life, and rational thought comes from irrational matter because there is a loving, powerful, rational God behind the universe. As a man of the sciences, as a man in evidence-based belief, which one of this is the more likely fact? Surely it's this one, that there has to be a rational, loving, powerful God behind the universe. Then I thought, okay, if there is a rational, powerful, loving God behind the universe, which is a more likely explanation, then surely if he can do that, it's easy for him to feed 5,000 people from 5 little loaves and 2 little fishettes, because he's doing exactly the same thing. He's making something come from nothing. And that's what Jesus is doing at that moment. In that miracle, he's saying, can you believe? Can you trust that I am the Son of God who makes something come from nothing? We worship and love a God who brings something from nothing, life from non-life, beauty from ashes, and something rational and purposeful where there is nothing rational and purposeful. So that's the first little thing that happened to me early this year, where I thought, okay, this is what I believe. The second thing that gives me insight on what happened to me back in those nothing years is this. My mother died earlier this year, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, in the month of May. It was sudden, it was unexpected, and it was very sad. And I had to speak at the funeral. And I remember at the memorial service, we had an open coffin, and I was able to look at my mother's body. And as I looked at her body, I thought, well, as a medical doctor, I know exactly what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a body. This is what we're trained to look at, bodies. But this is not my mother. This body is not my mother, because whatever my mother once had, I don't see in this body. So what is it that my mother once had that I don't see in this body? Well, we would call it life. The body is missing life. When my mother was alive, she had life, but this body has no life. But what is life? And this is something even medical doctors struggle to define, because life is more than a heartbeat. It's more than reflexes, because we can take those things away. It's more than brain activity, because that's just electrical impulses. We are somehow more than the sum of our parts. We're more than the atoms and molecules that we're made from. We're more than the electrical impulses that go on in our brain. Well, what is that more? Well, we call it life. And the Bible calls it spirit, soul. Somehow we have a spirit. We have a soul that makes us who we are, and that makes my mother who she was. Well, where does that spirit, where does that soul come from? Well, again, we have 2 choices. Either there is no God, and spirit, life, soul is just an illusion. It's a fictional story we tell ourselves, or there's a living spirit. There's a God behind this universe, and he breathes life where there is no life. And that makes us who we are, and that makes my mother who she was. And this is it then. If there's a God who could once bring a universe out of nothing, who could bring life out of non-life, then surely it's no small thing to believe he can do it again. And that's why there's a vision in the Bible where there's a prophet called Ezekiel, and he sees a vision where God just breathes life into these bones and he reanimates them. And that means it's no small thing for God to bring life where there's no life. And that's why we can believe in a future hope, a future restoration, and what Christians call a future resurrection. There is hope for a life beyond the grave, because we worship a God who brings life where there is no life. So what's that mean for us in transition? Well, it means this. When we're in transition, as I was, it feels like nothing is happening. It's like there's no life, there's no beauty, there's no rhythm, there's no purpose, there's no direction, there's no meaning, there's no story to cling to. But now looking back, I realize we worship a God who brings something out of nothing, life from non-life, beauty from ashes, meaning from atoms and molecules. And so even though we can't see it in the moment, God is working something in our nothing years. It's like it's like Jesus feeds people with two little sardines. What can Jesus do with the nothing years in our life? He can work a miracle. He's making something happen, even though we can't see it at the time. And so now I look back and I realize my nothing year was not a nothing year. I say, even though my medical career seemed to fizzle out and die, now my medical career has been able to give me flexible part-time work that frees me up for Christian ministry. So now I see a wisdom in what God was doing in cutting what I thought was what I wanted in medicine into what He wanted out of my medical career. Even though my Bible college career did not end well, it did not end on my terms. That's how I would put it. Now I see the wisdom in those years, in that it's given me the content and the knowledge for what I do in my latest phase with City Bible Forum. And even though the year felt like I had too much time, now I see it allowed me to see a counselor, which is what I had always wanted to do, but I never had the luxury of time to do that. And I was able to get so many things sorted out in my life through seeing a counselor. So now where I am, looking back to where I was, I can see the wisdom in the nothing years, and God was busy, and God was bringing life where there was no life. He was bringing something out of nothing, and He was bringing beauty out of the ashes. I just couldn't see it at the time, but it just comes down to this again. We have two choices in life. Is there no one behind this universe? And what has happened to me is just what happens. Like this is just part of the random chaos and chatter of the universe. Things happen. There is no purpose. There is no story. Get over it. Or we have a second choice. There's a loving, powerful, wise God behind this universe. And there is a reason for what happens. And we are part of a bigger story than just our own.